Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Dhaiphong. This is the first stream of 2026. I'm a little under the weather, but I have Larry Johnson and Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson here to help carry the load today. Gentlemen, it's good to see you all in 2026. Happy New Year. Everybody hit the like button as we get started here. That helps boost the show in the algorithm. Let's get started, gentlemen, with the latest news, which is that Vladimir Putin and Russia, of course, they've promised that there will be a massive payback for the assassination attempt on Vladimir Putin at his presidential compound. Now, there has been the latest news here where Russia has launched one of its largest drone attacks on the Zaporozhye region. And this comes after, and I'll play the video, this comes after Ukraine reported that Russia launched about 200 drones on New Year's Day. And this attack supposedly had about 116 long-range drones. And so this has been a near daily occurrence. And this all comes, gentlemen, as there's been the revelation that I'm sure you all are familiar with now, which is that the CIA taught Ukraine. Here is the source. Here is from the Telegraph. The CIA taught Ukraine how to target Putin's Achilles heel in terms of striking oil refineries at $75 million of damage per day. It said that Donald Trump's blessing back in June was given to the CIA to covertly provide specific intelligence to bolster Ukraine's aerial offensive against oil refineries. So, gentlemen, how about we begin with you, Larry? What do you make of all of this? How has this escalated the situation, and what is Russia's response, and are we already seeing it?
No, we're not already seeing it. This is, look, Russia's been launching upwards of 900 missiles and drones a day for, at least the last year. So that's not new. I think what was inherent in this Russian promise to retaliate for this attempt to assassinate Putin is going to be something far more serious. It'll be ominous, and it's the kind of thing that could expand the war. Let's understand what's going on. Donald Trump, within the last 6 to 8 months, had sort of directed the army to start, the U.S. military to start standing down, backing out, reducing its signature in Ukraine. There are different accounts with respect to what was said to the CIA. Some accounts suggest that Donald Trump did a wink and a nod and told the CIA basically, you can go on and continue to kick the hell out of the Russians. There are other accounts that suggest that the CIA is acting independently of Trump and following its own agenda. I find both credible. And it's possible that Trump, instead of directing the CIA to do it, asked to be kept in the dark so he'd have plausible deniability. Regardless of which of those, aspects apply here, the fact of the matter is that the Russian reaction to this attack is unprecedented in terms of their initial, vocal protests about it. You go back over the last 4 years to, September of 2022, when Daria Dugina, the daughter of Alexander Dugin, was killed in a bomb plot that was intended to kill him. You've had the assassinations of at least 3 lieutenant generals in the Russian army, and over the last year and a half. You've had the Crocus City Hall terrorist attack that killed over 143 people. So you got to step back and say, why is Russia reacting with such indignation and anger over the launch of 91 drones that did not hit their target and didn't kill anybody? And I think the answer lies in the fact that the Russians have intelligence and had intelligence early on. And I believe it's because Russia has penetrated the Ukrainian intelligence services and knew that this attack was being launched deliberately at Vladimir Putin. And it was being done so in the most cynical way possible, while it was launched while Zelensky was in Mar-a-Lago meeting with Donald Trump. Now, both the Wall Street Journal and New York Times came out over the last couple of days with, "Oh, the CIA says it's a lie by Putin. They weren't targeting Putin's residence." Here's the kicker: the CIA says they were targeting another military target in the area.
Yep.
How the hell did they know that? I mean, the only way they'll know that is that they were involved, period. And right there, God, you gotta just loathe the incompetence that's on display by the CIA. Because, the way to deny this is to say, hey, we didn't see a single drone launched, but that's not what they said. They didn't dispute at all that there were 91 drones launched. They just wanted to quibble about what the real target was. Well, that is, to quote Ray McGovern, male bovine excrement.
Yeah, well, Colonel Wilkerson, it seems like the CIA has really blown its own cover in that regard to what Larry was saying. But then just not a day later, there was the reports that the CIA has been aiding Ukraine and conducting such attacks. And so I'm curious, same question to you. What do you make of all this? And what do you see as Russia's possible response to what is a major, especially during negotiations with the United States, a major attempt at Vladimir Putin?
Well, as Larry suggested, there's some serious considerations here, and he pretty much outlined them. Does the president know? Does he know and want plausible deniability? Or is it completely out of his ken? Maybe he's inclined to accept it and to make hay out of it, but he didn't necessarily order it, nor did he know it was going on. These are all important questions, particularly in light of what I know about the CIA, Larry knows about the CIA, and what a rogue organization they can at times become and have been, as far as I'm concerned, ever since we started the so-called war on terror, and even before that in some respects, but really since that time. Then the second part of it is, when is Putin's prudence, circumspection, and patience going to wear out? I don't think I would give it much tendency to endure very much longer. And then the question becomes, if I'm right on that, and I think Larry might agree with me on that, what's he going to do? How big is it going to be? Against what target is it going to be wielded? Might it be something significant outside Ukraine, but in one of the guilty parties? And by that, I mean leading guilty party, London or environs. That's a huge question right now, because I don't think this man of steel patience or steely patience is going to endure these kinds of provocations much longer.
Yeah, Larry, I'm curious, what might be, because we know it's coming soon. We know that Russia has said, Sergei Lavrov has said that the targets have been set for an upcoming response. What might it be?
I think it will be focused. It will still stay within the boundaries for now of Ukraine. The Russians, I am certain, have the coordinates of different CIA and MI6, both the main offices, where what the CIA calls the station, and then what the subunits, which are called bases, and they are scattered about. I've heard numbers upwards of 40 CIA personnel that are in country playing a supporting role for the military operations. And so I think up to this point, Russia has deliberately avoided targeting those in order just not to run the risk of expanding the war with the United States. But I think now their patience, they're fed up. Because, well, when you go back and look at their reaction to this failed, let me emphasize, it was a failed attack. I mean, it'd be one thing if it hit and actually killed some people, but it was a complete, utter failure. You could make the case that, well, if it's a failure, why are they so pissed off? Because it's a betrayal. They have been, I think throughout this negotiating process, Vladimir Putin has been making the case. No, I think the Americans are sincere. I think they genuinely want to reach a deal. Let's give them a chance. This now has demonstrated to the hardliners around Putin that, yeah, we gave those assholes a chance, and look at what they did. No more chances. Done. We're going to send them a message they will remember. And that's why I emphasize that, go back and look at they're basically 14 major terrorist attacks, either assassinations or attacks, like blowing up the railroad bridge that collapsed on a civilian train, time to do so. That was back in May 31st. But each time Russia retaliated, but they didn't retaliate in a way it was so dramatically different from what they'd already been doing. This time, I think this time will be different. And again, it goes to the question of the betrayal by the West, that despite promises that they're going to turn a page, despite promises that they were going to do something different, it's turned out to be just the opposite.
Colonel Wilkerson, is this an Oreshnik moment? We know that Russia has put it on combat duty, the Hazelnut missile, Oreshnik, in Belarus, and also I believe has armed a very elite brigade with it. Is this the time where Russia considers using this missile?
Well, could be. The only reason I kind of differ with Larry there is because I think Putin has figured this out. I may be wrong, but I think he's figured this out. If you characterize this more or less, and I think it can be characterized this way, as akin to and very much like what we did to Iran, that is to say, we were negotiating and we killed them under Israel's aegis, if you will. If you compare that and you then say, well, Putin has been really tolerant, really patient, and so he won't expand it outside of Ukraine. Here's the problem I have with that. If he were to have perfect targeting and use not one, maybe two or three Oreshniks and kill every single CIA agent in Ukraine, Donald Trump would not give a whit. He would not care at all, and would find himself somewhat flabbergasted as to what he should do in response. And usually when he's that way, it's, well, it didn't get revealed. And Ukraine could say all day long that it did. I'm not even sure Ukraine would tout that they would even publicize that. They would just die. And maybe somebody, some errant reporter somewhere would pick up on it and suggest it, but it wouldn't be enough to confirm that Putin had intentionally done that, or that Russia had intentionally done that. So I can't believe he hasn't figured that out, that it's immaterial to Trump if you kill CIA people in the field. Americans, period, in the field, unless it's glaring and he has to go to Dover to accept the body bags. He doesn't care. This president has lied to us repeatedly about his non-warlike character. This president loves killing people. He likes killing people the same way President Obama loved killing people, as long as you can do it out of sight and out of mind. And Obama, of course, did that with drones, tripling or quadrupling the number of George W. Bush attacks by such mechanisms. So Trump is not in any way, fashion, or form against killing, as long as he gets credit for it And as long as it looks like it's something that's surgical or something like Qasem Soleimani or some other person that he might want to take out and get credit for, he doesn't give a damn about the CIA, guarantee you.
Yeah. Yeah, Larry, any reaction that you may
muted to me.
Am I muted? Can you hear me?
You're fine. Yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
Continue. Yeah, look, this the Russians are not the West. The West, and let's call it the Judeo-Christian tradition. I hate that term because there's really, we should be called Islamo-Christian tradition. We have a lot more in common with Islam than we do Judaism, but that's a side note. But they believe fervently in that, oh man, all you got to do is kill this one person, kill this one group of individuals, and your problems will be solved. And yet history shows that, even when Hitler killed himself, that didn't immediately end World War II. It continued on. So there's always somebody to step into the breach. What's going on here is the Russians are going to respond in a strategic way. And Larry may be right. They may decide to reach out beyond the confines of Ukraine. But, what I've observed, they do tend to escalate in a very methodical fashion. They don't go from 0 to 100 and redline it. They go, okay, we'll go to 10 miles per hour, now 20, now 30, now 40. I think they are on the cusp of pressing down on the accelerator and going a lot further than anybody in the West has ever expected. And part of that is because Putin has had such a measured response in the past, the West has mistakenly interpreted that as weakness, as fear, instead of recognizing that Putin is acting with some wisdom and patience. He's not getting emotional about this. But there are several around Putin that are quite emotional about this, and I think their emotions are going to help push Putin in a new direction this will mark an escalation of the war, whatever the Russians do.
Yeah, and Larry, Colonel Wilkerson, I want to show you this actually. In terms of this was Donald Trump's response to what happened, the assassination attempt on Vladimir Putin, the drone attack. He shared what was a New York Post op-ed that says the Putin attack bluster shows Russia is the one standing in the way of peace. And this comes, of course, as the CIA, despite being caught helping Ukraine with these kind of attacks into Russia, told Donald Trump that Ukraine did not try to kill Putin. I mean, at this point, it feels like parody, Colonel Wilkerson, but I'm curious on your reaction to these developments.
And I wonder if that's a tit for tat amongst the two, between the two.
Yeah.
Did the CIA do it? Did Ukraine do it? Did the CIA do it for Ukraine? Did Ukraine do it for the CIA? This is getting ridiculous in some ways. I don't know how to parse that other than to say that I wonder, at bottom, did Trump know it was going down? Whether he plausibly denied or he actually was in the kinetic decision, if you will, because that makes a whole heck of a lot of difference. And it particularly makes a whole hell of a lot of difference if, for example, the Russian intelligence gets a hold of that or gets some knowledge of that, or even gives a 70 or 80% credibility factor to it. Because here you are, again, I go back to what we did to Iran and complicit with Israel. We're in the middle of negotiations and we're trying to get somewhere on them this time, I think. And I think that's true about Trump's team, not necessarily in the way they should, but nonetheless, they're still trying sincerely to negotiate. And we do this, or we condone this. That to me is an infraction par excellence. That's something that, as Larry intimated, it may not be outside Ukraine, but it's going to be violent, and it's going to be tit for tat, if you will, but it'll be successful.
Well, Larry, the Russian military has already been conducting massive strikes on Ukraine throughout this duration of this 2025. Here is a map showing all, I believe it is 54,000 drones and 1,100 missiles on Ukraine. And of course, this is only getting worse and worse. Is there a move up the escalation ladder that could be, as you all intimated, adding on to this in order to respond to this massive violation of its sovereignty?
Well, first thing, let's point out, go back to that map for a second, okay?
Sure.
So this shows all of the attacks of Russia on Ukraine in 2025. Significant, massive. Now ask yourself the question, did this cause Ukraine to collapse? No. Did it damage Ukraine? Yes. But it has not caused the government to collapse. It hasn't caused the military to collapse. Hasn't caused the economy to collapse yet. Does anybody, either of you, or is there anybody listening out there that thinks that in 2026, Ukraine could launch that many missiles and rockets and drones at Russia? No, they don't have the capability. They don't have the missiles, number one. Yet, my former colleagues at the Central Intelligence Agency, and I suspect at the Defense Intelligence Agency, pushed this load of crap that somehow, if Ukraine just did this, we'll give them some tomahawks. No, more attackums. That would make a difference in terms of Russia's position on the battlefield. That's actually what this picture, this image shows, is how ridiculous the Western military analysts are. How far up their ass their heads are jammed, that they do not understand what's going on. So Russia is causing major attrition on the Ukrainian side. And in fact, there was an article last night that pointed out that the final numbers for the exchange of cadavers of soldiers is in. And it has turned out to be at a ratio of 60 dead Ukrainians for every dead Russian. That has been the rate during this year. And that Russia's got more bodies, but Ukraine won't take them yet. So that underscores both how quickly in 2025 Russia is advancing to the West and the level of casualties, the disproportionate level of casualties that Ukraine is suffering, despite repeated lies on the part of the U.S. intelligence community to the president, to the vice president. I know for a fact that that CIA was telling Trump and Vance that the Russians had suffered 1 million casualties. It's a lie, and they are misleading the president. But it is what it is.
And Danny, let's look at that picture. You don't have to put the picture up again, but take what Larry just said, take that picture, and then think about this. Do you really think our people, all of them, are so stupid that they don't realize the differential there? So then the question becomes, why continue? That's got to be my central question of people like Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, and a whole bunch of people who are making it difficult for Trump to move any further in the way he would like to move, because they do not want any kind of peace between Russia and Ukraine. They want it to continue to the last dead Ukrainian.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, we saw on New Year's Eve, I believe it was, Ukraine conducted likely almost 100% now that we know of this with the CIA's help, a horrific attack on civilians. I believe the new count is about 27, 31 injured, 27 killed, 31 injured. Now, either Colonel Wilkerson or Larry, either one of you answer that question. Like, why then continue? Because Donald Trump did pick John Ratcliffe, who is a known Russia hawk, for his CIA post. And now it seems like we're reaping the whirlwind on that.
Has Trump ever selected somebody that has turned out to be a stellar choice?
No.
You know, what a fraud his television show, The Apprentice, was, where he convinced the American public that he knew how to hire and fire people. God, you know, he would screw up hiring clowns for a clown show. Okay, even if he asked them to come dressed as clowns. Remember, he's the one that hired Gina Haspel to run the CIA while he was president. Haspel was directly involved with the Russiagate to frame Trump as a puppet of Putin. He's the one that hired Christopher Wray, who conspired with the Department of Justice to try to get Trump charged with crimes that would force him from office. So, you know, Trump has a knack for, you know, kicking himself in his own balls and then, you know, wondering why it hurts so bad. So, I am thoroughly, completely disgusted by the incompetence of Trump in selecting personnel and then in holding those people accountable. He doesn't do it.
Just to reinforce that, Danny, I just picked up a paper this morning. It may have been more in the making than I know, but the article told me that Buzz Donnelly has just been refused command of the 7th Fleet and the 3rd Star, I guess, that would go along with that. Buzz was the commander of Reagan back in the time. And what he was ostensibly removed from the list by Hegseth for was they had some kind of celebration on Reagan way back there when, and that celebration featured a demonstration for comic purposes of transgenders or, you know, people in drag and that sort of thing. Things sailors do on boats when they're bored shitless and have to have something to break the monotony. They had a little play and so forth. Well, Hegseth is reaching all the way back into that period and into that event. And this is not a tail hook by any stretch of the imagination. And refusing this guy's 3rd Star, apparently, and command of 7th Fleet. And this is one of the few people in the Navy that I have some respect for. So this is crazy, just like Larry said. This is Trump letting these people go wild over this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's an absolutely a wild time, and we're going to have to see how Russia officially responds to these escalations. But I wanted to get your assessment of a developing situation now back to Iran, because we've seen there have been large-ish protests. I think they have been relatively exaggerated by the Western mainstream media. But according to the Washington Post, these are turning deadly, but they cannot verify the claim. So there have been protests. Iran has said that these protests have been about economic issues, especially relating to merchants and the currency in the situation that it's in. And now I want to share the Mossad. They came out in support of this. Let's come out to the streets, said the Mossad Farsi account. The time has come. We are with you. And Donald Trump, our friend Professor Mohamed Marandi, shared this. He shared Donald Trump's Truth Social reply where he said that if Iran shoots and
hey, Danny, be correct.
If Iran
shots and violently kills
he
peaceful protesters, I'm a dumbass that doesn't know how to write a Truth Social. Sorry.
Yes, it's true. You got that. Well, he said we're locked and loaded and ready to go to come to the rescue of the protesters. So, Larry, how about you open up with this? We've also seen major activity from Russia, Belarusian cargo planes. I'll pull that up in a second. About 5 in a 48-hour time period coming into Iran. And even Israeli media, and I'll pull that up as you react, has said why are they doing this? Why is Russia arming a failing regime that is under this incredible pressure domestically? What's your reaction to all of this?
Because Iran's ready to kick Israel's ass if they dare try to start something new. And this time, Iran didn't make the same stupid decision it did on June 12th, prior to June 12th of 2025, when they refused Russian offers of military assistance and Russian offers to actually have a mutual defense pact. Iran rejected it back then. No, look, it's just a coincidence that Bibi Netanyahu shows up at Mar-a-Lago last Monday to talk to Trump, basically to start begging Trump for new strikes on Iran, that all these protests erupt in Iran. Just a coincidence. Don't read anything into that. And then the Western media goes into an orgasm of political orgasm, we'll call it. Oh my God, the protesters are rising up. And then culminating with Trump making this stupid, yeah, you shoot them, I'm going to do something to you. Yeah, what are you going to do, Donnie? What are you going to do? Talk tough? You're not going to send any troops. That's impossible. This so infuriates me, what we're seeing, because the news stories being fed to the American public are nothing more than propaganda generated by the CIA, generated by Mossad, and designed for one purpose and one purpose only: to whip the American people up into a mindset where they will accept and allow Trump to carry out more military strikes against Iran. But the problem that Donnie Trump has is that his fantasies about the prowess of the U.S. military don't jive with the reality. The reality is called the Houthis. The Houthis forced us to retreat from the Red Sea. And in the event that we decide to start bombing Iran, the odds are much higher now than they were back in June 24th or June 25th, that Iran will actually have the capability to shoot down some U.S. aircraft. The wild card here is whether or not, and I know Colonel Wilkerson will talk about this, not happily, but we'll discuss it, is the possibility of Israel using nuclear weapons inside Iran. But even if they do that, that is limited. And all of that's going to do is escalate this war, particularly if those nuclear bombs end up killing Russian and Chinese personnel that are in Iran to assist the Iranian government.
Yeah, well, Colonel Wilkerson, I wanted to pull up as you're reacting to this. Israeli media posted this from an Iranian opposition figure, Shabnam Asalahi. And she says, why is Russia arming a regime that is falling apart? And she comments on the Belarusian aircraft that have been landing in Iran's capital in the last 48 hours. And she talks about how Iran is no longer a functioning state. So why, if from Moscow knows this, why would they prop up Iran anyway? And of course, there's all kinds of AI, as the kids say, slop here, talking about how Russia wants to make Iran dependent. But I want to know your reaction to all of this, anything that Larry said, as well as, are we looking at an attack coming soon, given all of the developments that have transpired very rapidly in the last, period or so, short period?
Well, I don't think anything has changed in my prediction that the war was inevitable. A resumption of the war was inevitable because it's Netanyahu's bucket list, if you will, and it's the last item for now on it. Let's look back at Mar-a-Lago, though. The incredible thing about the U.S.-Israel relationship that is now developed into a hurricane is this money. Biden, some $17 billion of money the United States does not have to Israel. And the $3.8 billion per year and the 10-year agreement, the memorandum that guarantees that with no consultation with anyone. It's guaranteed in law by the Congress, this supine Congress that we have, is now going to be, according to the propaganda or the news out of Mar-a-Lago, is now going to be extended to a 20-year memorandum, at least that much every year. America has never in its short history tied itself to another country by legislation giving them this kind of money every year without exception. This is insanity. And now the real reason it's insanity, because the regime that needs supporting, that needs this kind of money, is going to be taken down. And it's going to be taken down by Iran. And it's going to be taken down first as a Jewish state in the Levant. If it survives that in order to reshape itself into some sort of state that allows some democracy, and this is another fantasy about Israel. Netanyahu keeps praising them as the only democracy in the Eastern Mediterranean, indeed in Southwest Asia, indeed in the whole globe east of Gibraltar. They aren't a democracy. They are an apartheid state at best, and they're even a warped apartheid state that is now conducting a genocide that is so visible to at least 60% of the world that we have a hard time now in the world and in the media of that world denying it or countering it. And that takes me to another point about our media. Same thing I told a senior editor to Washington Post recently. If you don't think that's going on in Gaza, good did, get your ass to Gaza. Who have you got in Gaza? Who have you got in Egypt? Who have you got in Jordan? Who have you got anywhere reporting the truth back to you? Same with Ukraine. Anywhere on the face of the earth today, these papers, these media outlets do not have anyone on the ground doing what they should be doing. In the case of Israel, they can at least say, well, they won't let us be there. When did you insist? When did you say you got $17 billion from Biden and you're getting $4 billion a year? When did you insist that you put some on the ground? Because you're lying through your teeth, and you're lying to the American people on a 24/7 basis. You do not have the truth. You are taking, as Larry said, you're taking the, quote, truth, unquote, from the CIA, the Defense Department, and others who are leaking to you. So it's going to be ended this time, I think. I don't think the Iranians are going to back out, and I think Trump is going to have to live up to his promise to Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago and join him in this fiasco, and then we're off to the races.
Yeah, well, Larry, I wanted to pull up Iran's response, or one of the responses Iran had. This is from the Secretary of the National Security Council, Ali Larijani. He said, with the statements by Israeli officials and Trump, what has been going on behind the scenes is now clear. We distinguish between the stance of the protesting shopkeepers and the actions of disruptive actors, and Trump should know U.S. interference in this internal matter would mean destabilizing the entire region and destroying American interests. The American people should know Trump started this adventurism. They should be mindful of their soldiers' safety. So, Larry, what does he mean by this? What could be a possible reaction to this? Because some have even said that should an escalation move rapidly as it is now, that Iran may have to take preemptive action. What's your assessment, your take?
Yeah, no, Iran will not take preemptive action. It is against their moral code. It is against Islam. However, if attacked, they will retaliate this time in a way that they did not during the 12-day war. They will attack and destroy U.S. military bases in the Persian Gulf, Al Udeid and Qatar. There's the naval facility in Bahrain. There are a couple of others, but I know Al Udeid. I've been there. In the 12-day war, Iran basically worked out a deal with the United States. They would trade tit for tat. Each side would be able to sort of declare victory and go home. Iran actually received some concessions that have never been publicly acknowledged by the Trump administration. But this time will be different. Iran's not going to wait to see if the United States does anything. They will take them out. And they've got the ability to do it. They've got the wherewithal, and the United States does not have the ability to protect the soldiers that are deployed there. Now, that said, what's interesting is they just, was it yesterday, day before yesterday, they announced the closure of a major military base in Iraq. And so I take that as one more, if you will, warning indicator that the United States actually is preparing a strike against Iran. And they're starting to take some precautions to prepare for that, to minimize casualties or the lower the risk of casualties among U.S. forces in the region. But this will be a war of ballistic missiles and uh, drones, and on that, Iran has a decisive advantage over both uh, Israel and the United States in the conventional side. It's only on the nuclear side that that Israel has the decisive advantage. So, this really has the potential to get very, very ugly, very, very fast.
Colonel Wilkerson, what could Russia be supplying Iran right now, given that there is all of this cargo plane activity over the last few days?
More ammunition, I would suspect. If in those type of aircraft, I would suspect they're giving them more ammunition for what they've already given them in terms of supplies. Ammunition for the wing stores on the aircraft they have there, which I'm going to be interested in seeing how many Russians are actually flying those airplanes as opposed to Iranians. I know we had a distinct problem with that in Vietnam, and we had a certain problem with it in Korea. But in Vietnam, it was almost de rigueur on the Navy flights into North Vietnam to bomb that they would come back and say, met another one because they were decidedly better than what they were used to meeting. It wasn't very difficult to figure out who was flying the airplanes. And other things that they might need that are smaller and air transportable, missiles for their air defense batteries, things like that. Well, I don't really know what were on the aircraft, but I can speculate.
Yeah, well, Larry, I have a question for you, and then Colonel Wilkerson, if you could answer the same one. If we put this all together and we see Russia assisting Iran filling gaps, and we know that Donald Trump has already promised to strike Iran, not just over the nuclear question, which of course was always a pretext and a very questionable one at that, but also he had threatened during Netanyahu's visit to knock the hell out of Iran if they build weapons, if they rearm their ballistic missile capabilities. But Larry, doesn't Iran already have ballistic missile capabilities? I guess I'm confused by this.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the point I was going to make. They're going to rearm. When the hell did they disarm? Okay, they haven't disarmed. They've had them all along. Again, that goes back to this series of lies that were told by Donald Trump with respect to the so-called success of their obliteration of Iranian nuclear capabilities, etc. This is just, it's just one more raft of lies from Donald Trump. And, they can indulge these lies and these fantasies all they want. It doesn't change the reality on the ground, which is, that's exactly what they're going to have to deal with if they decide to go back in, which is since the end of hostilities in June, Iran woke up, turned to both Russia and China and said, man, I need help. They're sort of like, you remember the alcoholic who refused when the family intervened and they tried to get him to go to rehab and said no. Now he's checked himself into rehab. That's the Iranians. They've checked into rehab. They are taking and receiving weapons and defensive weapon systems, air defense from China and from Russia. And the Russians are very, very keen on this because Iran plays an important role in the broader scheme of things as far as Russia is concerned. Russia is going to break free of the West. from being able to be manipulated, controlled by the West. And to that end, Iran plays a critical role with its north-south being a key part of the north-south corridor. Now, let me just say, I forgot to mention that when I saw this flood of publicity about, oh my God, the riots and the protests, I called up Nima Al-Rashid. I think you may know who Nima is. He's another podcaster like yourself and has a pretty good sizable audience. Well, he's an engineer. He was educated in Germany and is a resident of Brazil, been living in Brazil. Just went back to Iran to visit family for the first time in 12 years. And so I called him up. I said, man, what the hell's going on? And he said, I don't know what they're talking about. You know, we're hearing about all this terrible activity, but we're not seeing anything. And, he was just further confirmation that at least in Tehran, in the main cities, they're very, very, very quiet. Some of the reports are what's going on in the outlying areas. And again, those are subject to exaggeration, but it's also part of this disinformation campaign being spread by the West. So this is, I defer to the accuracy of Colonel Wilkerson's predictions. He was saying all along they're going to go back to it. I really thought we would get into 2006 without going down this path, but Trump's meeting with Netanyahu on Monday back in Mar-a-Lago sealed the deal that, nope, we're going to war.
Yeah, and Colonel Wilkerson, your reactions to anything Larry said, but also the fact that we see this like very big problem of the Trump administration and Israel, coming together to plan and plot another attack on Iran. But the consequences could be devastating. Your assessment, your thoughts on anything Larry said?
Well, I think what he said is spot on. And I as he knows, because we were on a show together this morning, my grave concern is that when Netanyahu finds that he is in existential peril, he will go to the nuclear weapon and the nuclear option. And it can be delivered by submarine. It can be delivered in a number of other ways. But I wouldn't put it past him an inch to do something like that.
Yeah.
And that would really take it into a new dimension, because you've got countries like Pakistan who've sort of made statements that would indicate that they would enter the fray. You've got Russia and China, obviously. And one of the things I've been trying to assess through the few friends I have left in the Central Party School and elsewhere in China is, one, I wanted to get a confirmation on how much future contracts exist oil China is still getting from Iraq, because China is Iraq's most prominent buyer. And of course, that oil has to come through the strait. It could be rerouted possibly through various pipelines, but it would be very difficult to switch things and to backflow, as it were, in some cases. But China's got to have some very significant interest here too. Would they sortie a squadron, for example, to the Oman Sea or the North Arabian Ocean, or North Arabian Sea or the Indian Ocean approximate to it, just to say, I'm sending you a signal, you better not do anything that, either side, you better not do anything that would close the strait and interfere with the flow of oil. And what would that mean? In addition to the fact that I think Iran has the capacity to sink a U.S. aircraft carrier. Would they do that, is my question, because that would certainly be a huge move. I'm not sure how Trump would handle that, and that's part of my concern. I'm not sure how he would handle it. I'm damn sure how Hegseth will handle it. He'll go hide under his desk and cringe, and then come out when Trump says do something and tell the Navy to do something. And then you want to say, what you going to do, Navy? Send another aircraft carrier? Because we don't have that many right now. We're staging one off a place that needs an aircraft carrier like it needs a hole in the head, Venezuela. What are we going to do there? Also, another question. So this is getting to a point where we have the most incompetent leadership in the executive branch, to include the majority of the cabinet, we have had, I think, in our history.
Yeah.
And that is really saying something. And yet we are creating all these strategic traps around the world for ourselves. And as Larry has said, and I'll just double down on, with a military that is anything but what it was when we went into Iraq the first time. It's just a paper tiger in many respects. This is extremely dangerous. I mean, take the nuclear dimension out of it, and it's still extremely dangerous.
Yeah. And the final question on this topic for both of you. So Larry, first to you. This feels like something out of a CIA color revolution playbook? You have the meetings, the meeting between Trump and Netanyahu, and then suddenly we have mysterious protests. First, they were over economic reasons, and then you have violence. It sounds very textbook. And I pulled it up earlier, but I'll pull it up again. You have the Western mainstream media unable to verify claims of protesters being killed. So essentially, the Western mainstream media is promoting a completely made up idea if they cannot verify what's going on. And lastly, I wanted to, show that while there have been protests happening that many in Iran, Professor Mohammed Randi has said, they look like they're more like in the hundreds in smaller cities, not the thousands of thousands. You have here thousands of Iranians walking, not to protest, but to pay respects to Qasem Soleimani. You have just a situation where there are thousands of people on the streets in Iran to validate their current government. Does this follow a particular playbook, in your opinion, Larry?
Yeah. Well, again, this I don't believe in coincidence. I think the timing of launching this operation and information campaign or disinformation campaign, it was entirely scripted. That as Nima reported to me, a significant number of the people protesting are actually folks aligned with Ahmadinejad, the old, he is the hardliner for president from 12 years ago. And that they're upset because they view Pezeshkian, the president, as being too soft, too accommodating of the Americans. Now, what's really fascinating about this is that they are not protesting the Ayatollah. They are content with the Ayatollah, despite what the Western media, the narrative it's trying to set, to suggest that, in fact, this is a real organic protest against Khamenei. So, the West is trying to build off on this and hopes that they can carry out military action this time that will cause the government to collapse. And, you got to at least admire the tenacity for not giving up on this fool's dream. But that's exactly what it is. It's a fool's dream.
Final comment, Colonel Wilkerson, before we move on to the next topic.
I agree with what Larry just said, and I go back to that paper you had up there, but I don't accept any of them. The Washington Post, that was the senior editor with whom I spoke. And I asked the question, why are you not in some of these other places like Tehran, like Iran in general? There's no restriction on you going there. Are you scared? Are you a coward? You know what the answer was? We don't have the money.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Well, my God, we have the money to give to Israel every stinking day of the week, apparently. But we don't have the money to put our own media in places to check the freaking lies. They just go along with the lies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's don't have the money. The Washington Post doesn't have the money to send their journos to travel.
Well, it's not just they. I mean, the New York Times will tell you the same thing if they're telling you the truth. We're being our margins are so thin now that we can't have this big team like we used to have that goes all over the world and reports from capitals everywhere. There's interest. No, It's amazing how small our media is now in terms of global deployment.
Yeah, well, gentlemen, I wanted to end today's show. Colonel Wilkerson, do you have time? Do you have about 20 minutes just to finish off on Venezuela, or are you?
I can go another 10. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, you can just hop out. You know, if
Larry
if you
can
need
hold it better than I.
Oh, no.
All right. So, gentlemen, I wanted to cover a development that not many are covering at this time, and that is the fact that Donald Trump's tanker war against Venezuela, the sanctions, the blockade, it all seems to be falling apart, especially with the entrance of Russia and China into the mix. Now, Russia has asked the United States to stop the pursuit of a fleeing oil tanker. The tanker, which had been sailing to Venezuela to pick up oil, has claimed Russian protection, although U.S. authorities say it's a stateless vessel. Now, this, I believe, is the Bella 1, which is now renamed under Russian protection and has actually been chased by the U.S. Coast Guard for 2 weeks. And now there's also, or over 2 weeks now, and there's also this, Chinese oil tankers are challenging the U.S. blockade off of Venezuela. They're pressing ahead with Venezuela-linked voyages despite a U.S. blockade. We have 2 Chinese-flagged VLCCs operating near Venezuelan waters, with the Thousand Sunny due to arrive in mid-January in the Xingye, waiting off of French Guiana, or Guyana, according to a new report by Lloyd's List. So, Larry, to begin with you, what do you make of this? Because we've seen Russian tankers go into Venezuela. We're seeing now Russia, they say, requesting the United States Coast Guard to stop chasing now what it's claimed is its ship. I believe they put a flag on that ship. What do you make of these developments, given that we are now several weeks now entering into months of this escalation against Venezuela?
Yeah, it is the stark opposite of what was the acronym I learned from my mentor? He was a retired Marine colonel. Perfect prior planning prevents piss poor performance. So what we are seeing here on the part of the Trump administration, which comes as no surprise to Colonel Wilkerson, is the ultimate, the Olympics in terms of piss poor performance. If you're going to try to shut off oil tankers coming in and out of Venezuela, you would think, you would anticipate that ships that are not flagged might reflag as Chinese and Russian ships, which is in fact what has happened. Because once you put on a Chinese or Russian flag, then you run the risk of committing an act of war, an act of piracy against a legitimately internationally flagged vessel. The Trump administration clearly did not anticipate this. Looking at it, I think they honestly persuaded themselves that all we got to do is put our ships offshore, talk tough, make threats, and Maduro will end up crawling into the corner somewhere, curl up in a fetal position, cry and surrender, and we'll just be able to waltz in and take over. Well, that hasn't happened, not by any stretch. And it's almost as if the more bellicose the Trump administration becomes, the more obstinate and firm is Nicolas Maduro. And so here we are now going into, I think we started deploying the first ships mid-August.
Yep.
We're going 5 months into this with no results. And if they're pinning their hopes on that, special operations forces can insert and just create all sorts of mayhem, that's more of this World War II bullshit from the special operations executive. They were legends in their own mind. The story, as it was told, it was without the special operations executive, the Brits wouldn't have won the war. Nonsense. They are really a sideshow. Okay? They can do some damage here and there, but nothing that's decisive, nothing that's going to change the whole course of the war or the start of the war. So ultimately, as we saw with the start of the shock and awe campaign in 2003 against Iraq, it took putting U.S. troops in on the ground to try to go in and get some measure of control, which, again, we only got the cosmetic version. So this is the Trump administration failing to properly plan, hoping that they could throw things against the wall, something might stick, and that Maduro would go away. But it doesn't appear that Maduro got the memo.
Yeah, well, Colonel Wilkerson, to you, I wanted to ask you what you believe is Russia, especially, but also China's, what are their motives here, given that we have, and I mentioned this earlier, that it's now renamed, the Bella one is now renamed the Marinera or Marinera, I don't know how to say it, but it's now under Russia's
Marinera. That's
Marinera.
That's sailor as opposed marinara is a sauce out of Italy.
Yeah, I know, that's what I was gonna say. All right, so it's now under the Russia's official registry of ships, Colonel Wilkerson. So what is the what is the play here for Russia? What kind of impact does this have? Oh, sorry, you're muted. Hold on.
To do the same thing if they have to. We had a briefing a couple of nights ago at the Eisenhower Media Network. We were just Zooming to get all the fellows together. And one of the fellows had really done a bang-up job of laying down the force posture in the Caribbean. We have such stellar, and I'm not being derisive to any of these people because basically I like these people. They're not warlike, they're not warmongers. They just want to do their calypso and be peaceful. But we have such stellar allies in the Caribbean as Turks and Caicos, Puerto Rico, of course, and what's the other Dominican Republic, and we have airfields here we can use. And anyway, I'm looking at the force laydown and I'm saying, and we're up against China and Russia, not to mention Venezuela, and probably Colombia too in the mix if you really want to get down to it. This is really formidable what you've done here, Petey. You've put together a monstrous alliance, a monstrous display of forces, a huge force laydown that must just be intimidating not only Venezuela, but the whole freaking world. This must be what they think. They are going to pay the piper here if they don't wake up and smell the roses here pretty quickly. Russia and China will not put up with this. Look at the turn here. We're always talking about freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea. That's why we have to be there. I'd put a damn squadron in the Caribbean, Russian and Chinese. I'd put them there as a combined task force and say, we're just enforcing freedom of navigation. And the first thing we're going to do is make sure these tankers get where they need to go. That's what we're asking for. And what are you going to do then, Petey boy?
Yeah.
Larry, to you.
Yeah, no, I agree. You've got to figure out using force without a purpose is it's just opening up a sinkhole. If somebody is going to attack you and they are in the process of trying to attack you and you defend yourself and shoot and kill them, that's where the use of violence has been used to accomplish a specific objective. And it was clear what your objective was. You were protecting yourself. You were not going to allow yourself to be attacked. Well, what's the objective here with respect to Venezuela? Is it regime change? Okay, if we get regime change, who's going to be in charge? And do we have any level of confidence that whoever is in charge will actually know what they're doing and have some measure of public support for what they are doing? And there's right now clearly no evidence that such support exists for this woman who got the Nobel Peace Prize for doing nothing. But if they're banking on that, oh yeah, that'll come through. Machado, I guess is her name, or Conchada, something. The U.S. hasn't figured out that. Okay, how do we enforce that? Do we need to put troops in on the ground? Well, how many troops are you going to need? As I pointed out previously, Venezuela is 3 times the size of Vietnam. We couldn't control Vietnam when we had 543,000 troops on the ground. How the hell are you going to control a landmass that's about 3 times the size of Vietnam? With 18,000 people, not going to happen. And there's an ample heritage of fighting with and on behalf of insurgents, as well as the smuggling of goods needed by insurgencies in order to stay alive. So this is, the United States is opening an entire Pandora's box that it'd be one thing if this was the only strategic area in the world we were focused on. But, this is probably too old a reference for you, Danny, and most of your audience. But there used to be this TV character, Bob Keeshan. He played the role of Captain Kangaroo. He was actually a Marine, and I believe fought on Iwo Jima in World War II. But they used to have this routine where they'd put dinner plates on top of these skinny sticks and spin them, and they'd run around spinning they try to get like 12 plates in the air. That is a great metaphor for Donald Trump's foreign policy right now.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Colonel Wilkerson, you have time for one last question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to ask you your reactions to, Nicolas Maduro has not, the stories about him hiding and him being bunkers and all of this have since gone away. He's in many public appearances, despite Donald Trump's open regime change threats. And recently he said that he's ready to work with Donald Trump around, in the Times, of course, London tabloid-ish media, says the Venezuelan president conducted a streamer-style chat in a car saying that he's ready to work with Trump around not only drug trafficking, but also to make deals with American oil companies, which is interesting because earlier in this whole conflict, it was said that Maduro was giving up everything. But that's not really the tone that Maduro was setting the stage for. It was more of a cooperation tone. What do you make of these developments, and what explains Venezuela's, it seems like resistance, it's unwillingness to back down despite these threats and now even a stronger blockade?
Well, let's take the first part first. Nicolas Maduro, as Hugo Chavez was and did, is willing to work out an arrangement that is both beneficial for Venezuela, which means decisively improving his oil infrastructure because it's really atrophied. And he's willing to do it if that oil infrastructure, once repaired and functioning smoothly, can be as productive for him as it is for others, including El Coloso del Norte, the United States, the American empire. There is a win-win available here. We fix up their infrastructure. It then becomes far more productive of the 300 billion barrels of high sulfur content oil that they have, which is what we desperately need to refine and make diesel out of. The only other country that I'm aware of in the oil business in the world today that has high sulfur content quantities of oil is Russia. Footnote that for the future. So there is a way, already demonstrated with Hugo Chavez, it worked pretty well, to have an accommodation here, which is what I thought Trump was after the whole time he was bluffing all this military force and everything else. He was just trying to get the best deal he possibly could in this general fashion. Now I have no idea what he's trying to do. Now I think he's lost it. And again, I go back to the fact that I think about 8 or 9 hours out of every 24, he's demented. And I mean that. I mean that medically. He's demented. And he has no staff of any competence whatsoever. So I have no idea what we're trying to do now because it doesn't make any sense. And Larry is absolutely right. Machado is no better than Juan Guaido. They both have a following of, as one of my Colombian general officer, retired now, friends that I met under Plan Colombia when we shoveled $750 million down there, thank you very much, to Colombia, told me that Juan Guaido's following was about 25 people, as far as he could tell. I suspect Machado's is more than that. It might be 50. But she's also an Israeli agent. So now you know what is part and parcel of what Trump is doing down there is coordinated through Miriam's pocketbook and through Bibi's evil mind. That's part of it too. So how do you throw all this together and put all that force down there and say that anything makes sense? Say that there's a strategy. Say that there's even an operational technique, or maybe even decent tactics besides the CIA and SOCOM going ashore and blowing up a factory. I don't know. And I don't know how we get out of this because, as I said before, it's got global dimensions now. And were I Russia, China, I'd combine a task force as we did together. China was a member of it. And we went after the Somali pirates. And it was a very successful combined task force. We stopped most of that piracy on the high seas. I'd do that in reverse now, China and Russia together. And maybe there'd be other countries that would come into it too. I suspect there would be if they invited them. And they do freedom of navigation operations with armed escorts in the Caribbean and prove Donald Trump to be a feckless fool.
Yeah, Larry, as we enter the last few minutes here, any reaction that you have to that?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Look, this is the average person listening to your show and the average person watching the mainstream media, they have no idea of the kind of planning and preparation that goes into pulling off one of these operations, and many ways in which they can get derailed. The Trump administration approach appears to me to be one that is based entirely upon hoping that through bluffing and threatening that they can force Maduro to back down. And once you make those threats and the other side says, no, you're not going to bully me, then what do? And so Trump's going to have to either find an artful way to back down. But, the other part of this, as Colonel Wilkerson correctly noted, there is a Zionist dimension here.
Yeah.
The Zionist dimension is undergirding a lot of this. I didn't realize it, but I saw something last night claiming that Keir Starmer was actually, he attends a particular synagogue in England. If that's true, and he's actually Jewish, it's like, well, that goes to explain a lot.
Yeah. And Colonel Wilkerson, you mentioned in the final minute here, you mentioned that Russia with the oil, we should footnote that. It's my understanding that Russia is willing to do that kind of refinement that the United States seems to be squandering.
I think that's part of the attraction Donald Trump has to a rapprochement with Moscow. The money in general is probably more tantamount in his mind, but that is part of what his team, if he has anybody with any intellectual integrity on his team, especially, there's always been, in my experience, an oil team around the NSC staff. And they feed into various and sundry decision-making processes in order to make sure their interests are protected, which I think is fine, especially if it's Royal Dutch Shell and ExxonMobil and other companies like that who really don't have a flag to fly. They do when they need it, but their flag is really oil, and it's global. And I hope they're advising him on some of this stuff, because they could not be going along with, in my view, not the guys I knew from them, with this crap. They just couldn't be. It's just not productive.
Yeah, and there's all the talk about how U.S. oil companies, given the instability that could come out of this, they're not necessarily rushing back or looking to rush back.
They love stability. I'll give you an example. They would not go back into that very, very luxurious in terms of output northern Iraqi oil system, because they were the Kurds basically were defying Baghdad. Right. And they knew that if they went back into it, they'd have all kinds of legal repercussions later on. They didn't want that, so they wouldn't come back in. That's how sensitive they are to these kinds of things that don't make sense. They have some of the finest strategic think tanks in the world operating for them, and they don't like things that don't make sense.
Yeah.
Right. Great point. Well, gentlemen, it was a great show to be both with you today. It was great to be with you today. It was a great show. Everybody hit the like button before you go. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon, and I'll announce that very soon. Without further ado, though, you can follow Larry Johnson at Sonar21. I'll be sure to put that link in the video description as we end here. And Colonel Wilkerson, it's always a pleasure. Take care, everyone, and I'll be back again soon. Bye-bye.
Great.
Yeah,
Thanks, Danny.
You do well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had to
Yeah.
Stay out of the snow. Wear your
Yeah.
winter warfare survival gear.
Yeah, don't go to Syracuse.
Yeah, somebody says Shini and Quila, which is Happy New Year. Yes, Happy New Year to everybody. This is the first stream. Go to the video description. You'll find Larry Johnson's blog there, as well as all the places to support this work. All right, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.